Season 1 of The Making of You with Deante Young is presented by Buy Right. Buy Right is proud to be the only Eastside showroom for both new and used office furniture. Additionally, they offer over 35,000 office products for next day delivery. They are locally owned and operated. Please visit buyrightoffice.com.
You had mentioned, me being the first African-American, in this role in this system. That's an honor, and that's a blessing, and that's a milestone. But representation is not enough. Representation is one thing, but if people who are of color who get these type of roles and titles, if they don't effectuate groundbreaking change, then the representation doesn't matter.
Accomplishments are amazing. Jamar Rahming has plenty of them. He is the CEO of the Cuyahoga County Public Library System. He is also the president of the Public Library Association. And for 20 plus years, he has been a visionary leader in the library industry. One thing I must say, though, what's much more impressive than your accomplishments is your story. Who were you before you became who you are? People ask me, how did you meet Jamar? And I said, it was just all by God's will, because I had never heard of him, didn't know the first thing about Jamar. I'm at an event where Arsenio Hall was doing a sort of a fireside chat. After the event, there was a VIP event, and I was privileged enough to attend the VIP event, and that is where I officially met Jamar. And I can see that he was a very unique individual, just like I am. What are your earliest memories of your life?
Oh, wow. I would say the earliest memories of my life, I was a latchkey kid in inner city Denver. And so my mother was always working. And so my earliest memories were walking to the library to find a sanctuary space and going to the recreation centers in the summer with my cousins, who we were all around the same age. Yeah.
Were you born in Denver?
I was born in Denver, Colorado.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Denver, I heard about the Mile High Stadium, that everything is like really tough trying to breathe there.
Yes, because of the altitude change. So when competing sports teams, come to our city, we have an advantage, because it takes a few days for your body to adjust to the altitude adjustment.
Well, I tell you what, Cleveland has been very angry with people from Denver because of John Elway. But you're still one of the good guys, though.
Yes.
But this is interesting though, because I noticed that all of us, when we're young people, we have things that are kind of things we never forget, and it usually comes from our relatives, whether it's our grandmother, our mother, anything like that. So what can you remember from your childhood that was a really good piece of advice or encouragement that you got from your mom, your grandmother, or whoever was raising you?
Wow, that's a loaded question, because I have so many. I would say the memory that stands out the most was I had a babysitter who was an elderly lady from rural Mississippi, and she did not know how to read or write. She was a domestic, and she babysit kids. And one day when I came to her house after school and she fed me, she said, son, when you go to that school, she said, you learn all. She said, you learn all that you can learn as much as you possibly can. And she said that with such conviction and such fervor. And I just knew that what she was, that's why it resonated and it penetrated, because I knew that she really meant what she was saying. And she was coming from a space of, I didn't have the opportunity to go to school, but you do. So you go there and you do this for us. You do this for us, So I would say that that encouragement, her just, and it wasn't just, it was not just a simple, you need to go to school and learn. I mean, she was beseeching me. She was imploring me,
Yeah.
and there was just the conviction, the love behind that conviction is what really made that penetrate and stick with me all these years.
Yeah. So how old were you when that happened?
I was about 8 years old. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and see, I think that a lot of times when you hear stuff like that, you may not even be aware that even now that probably guides some of your decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Just when you think about that, we all need certain levels of encouragement, and it sounds like you got that in that place. Now, were you raised by your mom and dad or grandparents, or who were you raised by?
I was kind of raised by a village. I had, my mother was single, most of my formative years, and then she remarried, but I had a rich village. I had grandparents. I had a great-grandparent alive. I had aunts and uncles who all kind of just took me under their wing and encouraged me and provided for me. So yeah, I would say, I mean, all credit, of course, to my mother, who made, the ultimate sacrifices and took, stellar care of me. But I had a village.
Uh-huh. Now, were your parents or any of the people that raised you in that village, were they people of faith, and did they imbue that in you?
Oh, of course. My grandmother and my great grandmother were very, pious, older Black church ladies, who who believed that the gospel was everything, that standing on God's word was the ultimate flex and success in life.
Yeah. I know my grandmother, she always said that with God, when he's for you, he's more than the world against you.
Yes.
So whenever I think about church in any level at this point in my life, I'm always thinking about my grandmother. So I do believe that has a way of elevating us when we get those lessons early on.
Yes.
Now, one thing I also will say is that over the course of time, we usually, as children, get inspired by, someone, whether it's on television, in the movies, or even a book. Can you think of something that inspired you and gave you a vision when you were younger?
Well, I would say, I was kind of a mannish little boy, and I'm telling my age. This is before the internet. My cousins and we would sneak up late and watch HBO at night because we were told that naughty things were on HBO after hours, and so we snuck up one night and we watched. We heard that this nude lady would be on TV, and it was Lynn Whitfield in the Josephine Baker story, the biopic, the Josephine Baker story.
Yeah.
And we were looking at that just to see, a nude woman on TV, which that was a big deal, in the late 80s, early 90s. But mainstream television has changed, drastically. But we were just, I was really pushed in a corner after. I mean, the story. The story just it captured me. It captured me. It compelled me. I was really just taken aback that this woman could not eat at a restaurant that she wanted to eat at because the color of her skin. That she had to flee the country and go to Europe to have equal opportunities and equal rights, and that she was a humanitarian, and that she believed in equality for all people, and so she adopted 12 children of a different race, and then she was part of she helped defeat Hitler. She was part of the French resistance. She was a spy for World War II.
Josephine Baker?
Josephine Baker. Yeah, Josephine Baker.
Wow.
Josephine Baker, this was a consummate human being. And so I was just really compelled. So I went to my school library, and there was not one book in the school library on Josephine Baker. And so I wrote a letter. I was about 9 years old. I wrote a letter to the school superintendent and asking for a book on Josephine Baker. And so the superintendent was just taken aback by this and put a book on Josephine Baker in every school in Denver public schools.
Wow.
And so, so because that small act, I mean, Josephine, Baker's story, was, kids had access to her, to her story, and were able to learn about her, and so, you had mentioned, me being the first African American, in this role in this system. That's an honor, and that's a blessing, and that's a milestone. But representation is not enough. Representation is one thing, but if people who are of color who get these type of roles and titles, if they don't effectuate groundbreaking change, then the representation doesn't matter. Just like with Josephine Baker, I had this knowledge. I had this knowledge of her, of her story as a young kid, and so I went and I discovered that her story was not being properly told, and that our library collections were not being properly curated with Black history. So I took a step. I took an action to bring about a change that made Josephine Baker's story accessible to every kid in the school system.
That's exactly what I mean when I talk about formation, because Josephine Baker existed to really elevate other people, and then you became someone that changed a lot of things for a lot of people, whether you know it or not.
And then, about 3 years ago, for Women's History Month, I was able to, at my last library system, I was able to host Lynn Whitfield.
Really?
So she came, and I got a chance to sit down and interview her, and so the fact that I was able to, because it was her craft and her art that actually canonized Josephine Baker and brought Josephine Baker to life, because Josephine Baker had died in 1975. And by 1990, she was forgotten. Yeah. And then when Lynn Whitfield did this biopic that just everybody became enamored with, that was probably, biopics are very mainstream now, but they were so far and few, in the late 80s and early 90s. And so Lynn Whitfield, her craft and her art, she embodied, she lived, Josephine Baker. And so for me, 35 years later, to be able to sit face to face and to kind of give her flowers and be able to share her with my local community through library services. That was just monumental. And it was just it's just amazing at how her art kind of helped shape my career path. Yeah. Shaped my career path, and then I was able years later to deliver her to my community.
And that's what I mean when I talk about a public inheritance, because what she did and then also what Lynn Whitfield did, all of that came and coalesced into what you became.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we can't see the picture when we're in the frame.
Right.
And that's why I always try to tell people, let's tell stories outside the frame, because those details and that texture truly matters. I think that's amazing. And you started off just wanting to see a nude woman, and then it just became something that was very prosperous in a very important way. And you said something really meaningful when you said representation is not enough. One of my favorite philosophical concepts is have more conversations, because conversations that you have, they can take you anywhere. You never know what you can uncover, and you never know what you might be able to unlock in someone else. When it comes to people that you met along the way, we all have people that changed our direction, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a mentor. It could be someone that you met for 15 minutes when you were 16 years old that said something that was pivotal. Now, who would you say are some of those people that changed your life and basically sent you in a different direction?
I would probably say, I had a grandfather that really poured into me, that picked me up on the weekends and took me to sporting events and took me to buy my first car, taught me how to tie a tie, taught me, when I was growing up, that I needed to carry a wallet and, keep my, ID in there and my money, and that I needed to be a responsible man. And he was a World War II veteran. and he had that really old school, that old school kind of, work ethic. I mean, they just don't make him like him. He was a real man. He was a real man. I mean, he knew how to. I mean, he could go to somebody's house and install a water heater. He could change a flat tire. He knew something about everything, and he was just tough. He was tough, but he was a benevolent tough. And me not growing up in my early years before my mother remarried, not growing up in a home, with a father figure. He stood in the gap, and I think that we cannot forget about these people that just stand in the gap, for others. I mean, he didn't have to sacrifice his time and his resources and his energy and his love, for me. I mean, there were so many other things that he could be doing, but his life is also just a lesson that is critical, that those of us that are able, that we have to stand in the gap. We have to stand in the gap for for these kids that don't have father figures, or they have broken homes, or they have issues or problems, or that they have parents that are just overwhelmed and don't have the currency to give the kids what they need. So it really, the relationship between he and I is just a valuable lesson in the strength of community, the strength of village, and the critical relationship that kids and their grandparents, must have. We live in a time today where kids are seemingly indifferent to their grandparents. My joy, if you wanted to get me to light up, just say that, I get to spend the weekend at my grandparents' house, or they're picking me up to take me somewhere. And that kind of that segment, and I think most, and it was kind of when you went to your grandparents, that was when all your cousins were there, and your grandparents just have a different. They can tell you things that your parents can't, because your parents are telling you the right things, but you're not listening to them. But when grandparents say something, you listen, just because of the role and mantle that they have. And grandparents have, they've lived, they have experienced, they've loved, they've hurt, they've experienced it all. And for you to be able to kind of sit in that space and be with that person who has a panoramic view of everything, and you've just scratched the surface on life. It's monumental. It's invaluable. And today, with the social media generation and kids being kind of raised by devices and tablets, they're just missing out on. They're missing out on the
human touch,
and just the utilitarianism of the interplay between grandparents and grandchildren, and and so that's just something that's just kind of and I think too in the black culture, your grandmother, the matriarch of the family, just that at one time, that was everything to us. And we kind of, the way that there's just been a paradigm shift in our culture to where it isn't popular to be a grandparent. It isn't popular to be a grandparent because people associate being a grandparent with being old. And we live in a culture that kind of bemoans old age. And you have these grandmothers now that they want to, they want to wear stiletto heels, and they want to be youthful, and they don't want to be, they don't want to be a matriarch or a matron. Because they associate that with being old and having one foot in the grave. But I was blessed to where I had great grandmother and a grandmother. They were ladies. They were ladies, and they had that matriarchal, love and wisdom, and they embrace that. They embrace that to where today. There's just a resistance to being a matriarch because you don't. It's socially unacceptable, to be to getting older. You know.
Well, I can tell just from your enthusiasm that they played a huge part in who you are now, your grandparents. And I can relate to that, because like I said, my grandmother, she was always really godly, and she would tell the whole world that I could do anything. It was like she was a spokesman or something.
That's
paid.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that reaffirms you. And I'm sure that really helps you, because what we need a lot of when we're younger is encouragement.
Oh, yes.
Because without encouragement, we're walking around feeling like other people are better than us and more significant. So I would definitely say that lifted you probably more than you realize, and you realize a lot. Now, what high school did you go to?
I went to Gateway High School in Aurora, Colorado.
Aurora, the infamous movie theater shooting.
Yes.
In 2012.
Yes.
And so with regard to that.
The Century 16 shooting, and then not too far from that was the Nathan Dunlap shooting at the Chuck E. Cheese. So Aurora has had some massacres.
So what was your life like April 20th, 1999?
April what?
April 20th, 1999, the Columbine
shooting. The Columbine shooting. Well, it was certainly an out of body experience. I mean, today it's today there's no normalcy is gone. Today, when you hear about somebody being shot, the shock value is gone. There's no alarm. But 25 years ago, when somebody got killed, it arrested everybody. Everybody paused, and everybody was shocked and outraged and upset and hurt. And so today, I mean, it's so normal and it's so frequent that everybody's desensitized. But we were just in utter shock. I just could not believe that something like that could happen. I mean, that was unfathomable for something like that to happen in a public building, in a public high school.
Yeah. Whenever I think about Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, it just takes me back to what we were just talking about. Did they get encouragement as from their family? Because it seemed like that they were just outcasts, and normally when that happens, not to psychoanalyze, but it seems like you don't have the right situation at home. And then you end up taking this into the world and devastating and decimating other families.
I think you could possibly be onto something, but nobody has a perfect home life. I mean, everybody. I mean, you see all kind of people that flourish in the world who had just dysfunction and broken homes, and so we can't.
Yep.
It's an oversimplification. I think we often put that there's also this propensity to, or this inclination to fault parents for what they did or didn't do for kids when kids make poor choices. But really, I mean, we're responsible for ourselves, and we know right from wrong. We know right from wrong. We know right from wrong. Yeah, we know right from wrong, and we can't. I mean, we can look at our choices, and we can look at the pathology of the choices and trace it back to some childhood experiences or parenting. But ultimately, when we make bad choices, we have to own them. It's our responsibility. Yeah,
that's very true. When you graduated high school, what did you do from there?
I went straight. I went straight to to college. I went to the University of Northern Colorado. Yeah, I went straight. Yeah, I went directly to college, and I went from college to graduate school. So I stayed in school. I was in school 8 years straight.
Yeah, wow. Did you have a real idea of what you wanted to do?
Well, I initially went in with the intention of being an educator. I wanted to be. I wanted to be a high school principal, high school educator, and I was on that course, on that trajectory for the first 3 years, and then my mother, midway through my college career, had 2 brain aneurysms and they ruptured, and so she was in intensive care for 3 months. So I had to take a little time off that semester to go and check on her. And consequently, I just missed the deadline, to do the student teaching. So I didn't finish the teacher education program. But my advisor, I had won a couple of research contests, and I had worked in the archives department of the college library. And so she put on, she said, there's a fully funded graduate degree program at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and you should apply. And so I applied, and I got a fully funded scholarship to get a library science degree, a master's in library science at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
So being a part of that with the whole library thing, that was kind of your version of being an educator. Did you see it that way?
Well, sort of. At this time, I figured I was going to be a college professor. I was just going to get a PhD, and getting a library science degree. What I was going to do is go to a university and be an academic librarian. And since I was faculty, I could audit the PhD courses for free.
Oh wow!
So that was
Right.
so that was what I was going to do. I was going to go into higher education, but I ultimately just fell into public librarianship just by accident, and that's been a godsend.
Now, being in a part of the library system, I'm assuming that you like to read prior to that.
Oh, most definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, because every time I went to a library, because I was raised around the Glenville Library. The Glenville Library was like literally about a 3-minute walk from where I live. And I just, you get lost in the world of books. And I think you can go anywhere reading a book. Did you feel that way about books, or was it just?
Most definitely, because being a latchkey kid in inner city Denver, we didn't take family vacations and do all that, but I was able to travel, the world by virtue of reading a book. And also I was able to, I had a first grade teacher one time tell me that I was going to end up, in jail when I grew up. And when I went to the school, when I went to the public library and I went to the Black History section, the children's section, and I started reading books on George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington and Frederick Douglass and all these, I got really immersed into biographies. I realized that was not my future. If Frederick Douglass, who was born a slave, could be one of the best orators in American history, and George Washington Carver could take a peanut and make a miracle out of it, and come up with all these ingenious agricultural developments, then I could do anything that I set my mind to it if I want to, and jail and prison, is not my future. Yeah. So the library expanded my worldview, and it gave me an opportunity to to believe, to hope, to aspire, to think, to empathize.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I think is amazing is that it sounded like you had such certainty with what you want to be, and you did not doubt yourself. That's what it sounds like. The same thing happened with Arsenio. He was doing magic tricks and doing all these things as a kid, and he got that encouragement from his mother. I got encouragement from my mother as well, but I still don't even know what I want to be right now, But I just want to know, did you ever have a moment where you felt any type of limiting beliefs, any type of self-doubt, any insecurities, because it's common for so many of us when we're younger?
No, absolutely not. No. I just know that, my belief system is everything that I have. God is everything that I have, and I know that He's charted my course. The Bible says that the steps of a righteous man are ordered by the Lord. So I know that if the Lord is in control of my life, that it isn't what I believe or what I want. It's what He's already proposed, and it's just up to me to walk in that path.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now, When you start climbing the ladder, did you have like an end game when you were in the library system? Did you say, well, I want to own a library, or I want to do something like that?
No, I had no, I really had no, when I first came into the industry, I mean, I just saw like, CEOs and library directors. I mean, that was just so far, away from me. I never, expected and never thought that I would be sitting in a space like this today. But as I got into closer proximity of leaders, I said, wow. I mean, if this person can do it, I certainly can. And then I just saw, that I just had such poor leaders that were full of ego and just clueless in terms of how to lead people and how to influence them. And I said, I need to step in this space so that I can change, the culture of the industry that I work in.
Yeah. Yeah. If you could think of 2 or 3 people that came into your life and they kind of guided you to where you are, because we all need access. And who would you say? I would say I had a peer who became my best friend. His name was Michael, Owens, and we were in different seasons of life. He was a manager of a manufacturing company, and the company folded, so he went back to graduate school he got into the same program I got into, and we became friends, and we graduated around the same time. And he got a job as a branch manager of a large library in Oklahoma, and I had never. At that time, being a branch manager, you had to work in a library system for several years and work your way up. And so for him to step right out of a graduate program and get that job, that was a big deal. And so I was working an entry level job, and he said, there's another manager's position open up. It's a small library, and I think you'd be perfect for it. You should apply, And it was an overreach because I'm in my 20s, and at this library, the staff, they were all in their 40s and 50s and had years of experience. And he told me I should apply, and so I went and interviewed for the job, and I got it. And the fact that he encouraged me and he believed in me and he pushed me, I went and did it, and the Lord opened up the door for me. Yeah, and that's what what I call being a faithful servant. Because the Lord does open doors. And, there's a woman who, I don't know if you know her name is Gail Henderson, but she is a very talented person. She is she's able to do poetry on the spot, and it's like hip hop poetry, but it's all about the Lord. What she says to me is, whenever I say, I want to accomplish this and accomplish that, she says, ask the Lord to enlarge your territory. And whenever she said that to me, as soon as she said it, I do that every single day. So I think all of these things are, the Lord ordering our steps. And that's exactly what happened with you. My grandmother said, nothing just happens, just dry along so. She's from Louisiana, so of course, she kind of speaks that way. Yes. But I would say this is definitely what you were supposed to do. Now, when you think about it, have you had any relationships that kind of, with someone that made you say they have negative energy? This is not for me because I'm focused, I'm tunnel vision, but this person is stepping in the way. Or have you had the opposite where they were very supportive?
I think I've probably experienced both. I tend to the Lord has given me the capacity to give a lot of grace. So I just, my approach to life and people is give a lot of grace, and I've learned to have very low expectations of people, and the beauty of that is that when you have very low expectations of people, when their humanity, when their humanity prevails, you're not devastated or disappointed, and when they do something well or right, you're excited and happy because you didn't have any expectations.
Yeah.
So I don't have very. I have very low kind of expectations, for people. And so if I come across a genuinely, good person, then I'm excited and I embrace them. And if the person is not so good, then I just let them stay in that space, because and with no impact to me, because I didn't expect much out of them anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is actually a perfect segue to what I'm going to say now is if someone that knows you very well, like your best friends, what would they say about your personality? What, oh, he's generous, or he's a task driver. What would they say?
Oh boy, that's kind of hard. I think you might have to ask them, but I don't know. I think they probably would say I'm very adventurous. I've lived in 10 different states.
Wow.
I travel regularly. I've lived in 10 different states. I mean, I'm not, afraid to uproot and move and try something new and try something different.
Yeah.
I guess they'd probably say that, I'm a committed person. When I was in school, I was at one school and my family moved across town and I wanted to still continue to go to that same school. So as a small kid, I took 3 city buses to get to school every day, Yeah. And so I had about a 2.5 hour commute, every day as a kid in middle school. And I had to transfer to 3 buses and I did that in inclement weather, rain, snow, sun, or shine. And I was a student on the advisory council for the school, and they'd meet sometimes they met, monthly at 7:00 at night, and they ended at 9. And so with me living so far away from the school, by the time I, would have to get home, it'd be time to go back. So I would have to stay at school, on the days of those meetings from 7:00 in the morning to 9:00 at night. So I'd have to, and they didn't allow kids in the building after school. You had to leave. And I had, nowhere to go. So I would have to, so a teacher knew about this and would let me hide, in her classroom. So I would hide in her classroom, and she'd bring me a sack lunch, and I would, stay there till it was time for the meeting. And then when it was time for the meeting, I'd go to the meeting. And then at 9, I would, at that time, my mother would either, pick me up or I'd get the bus, home.
Well, that's
the buses, yeah.
That has to be so tedious. That's tedious. I do want to ask you, what type of struggles have you had? A lot of times we face battles. Mm-hmm. It could be substance abuse. It could just be, envy of other people. Mm-hmm. Any type of thing that you've dealt with that's kind of been like your Achilles heel.
Wow. That's a loaded question. I probably would say, wow. I would probably say that I would like to be a more disciplined and self-controlled, person. I'm not irresponsible, but I certainly could manage my time better, my resources better. I just tend to, aside from work, work, I'm paid to be, organized and structured and a good steward of public funds. But, in my personal life, I just kind of, since I'm a family of one, I just kind of do whatever I want to do, as long as what I'm doing is legal and ethical. But, I think that God calls, God wants us to be, disciplined and self-controlled. And the Bible says to owe, nobody anything but love. And so that's a debt that I haven't paid very well. I think that I certainly could love a lot harder.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So you don't have you're not married at all?
No.
Okay. So that's actually, it kind of gives you room to really truly be who you are.
Mm-hmm. Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of us, we have to sacrifice. I never thought I would get married. I was just planning on having one night stands for the next 20 years, but
you know what? But when you're married, if you're married to the right person, you're a better version of yourself, because the way marriage is designed is that you two complement and complete each other. Your significant other probably has skill sets and gifts that you don't have, and vice versa. And when you two come together, you're better versions of yourself. So actually, many of us who are single, we've got areas of deficiency that there's nobody there to fill the holes in.
Yeah, and I would say that she made herself undeniable. I got married last year. We met 6 years ago.
Wow.
She made herself undeniable because I had a better chance of winning a $1 billion lottery than to marry someone. So she was able to break those odds.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Yeah. But then, when you're single, you have a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
You have a lot of freedom because when you're married, that there comes a point to where both of you have to put each other's needs and happiness above your own. And when you're single, you don't have that. You don't have that summon.
Yeah, that's very true. What would you say is your greatest skill?
Probably my greatest skill is extracting the greatness out of other people to accomplish a task. And so being a leader, of course, a good leader, you realize your deficiencies, your limitations, but if you can find people around you who have skills and gifts that you don't have, and you extract those and you move those around to fulfill your vision and to satisfy your mission. I mean, that's a gift, and that's a gift that I have.
Yeah. How do you think you got that gift? Because it's always earned. There's always a story behind it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that you always, I just think that I was I think I have this inherent kind of discerning spirit, like, growing up, with a single mom who worked, very, very hard and made sacrifices. I mean, I could always read, between the lines and see that, man, she's lifting all this weight, by herself, Yeah.
Yeah. So all of these things, I have a very clear picture of who you are because of who you were before you became who you are. And this is so important for society. This is society's gift and public inheritance we talk about. I feel people need to know someone like you that's in a leadership position and understand that this didn't just happen overnight, that you had to grow into this. And that's why I always tell people, I said, listen, we are the least qualified to know what people need from us. And I say, well, you might be done with your past, but your past has more work to do in other people. And that's why I like to ask you these questions.
Yes.
So this is very, very valuable. Just want to touch a little bit on what you're doing now and what's next for you. In this, you've been doing this for 10 months.
Yes.
And I'm sure that you have aspirations beyond what most people would even think of because you are that type of person, I can tell. Talk a little bit about what you have going forward and what you would like to accomplish in the next, say, 20 years.
Well, you know what? I honestly don't think that we're going to make another generation.
Wow.
I think that we're in the end times. I think we're pressing towards the end, and so I think that we're in a with the world being on fire and everything being shaken. I don't think that we're permitted to think 20 years out right now. I think that what the call is by the grace of God, make the most of each moment and each day to redeem the time.
Wow. My grandmother was saying that when she died in 1998. She said we're living in the final days.
Yeah, but I think that I think if you just and older people have always said that, and the younger people were quite cynical. But I think when you say that today in 2026, people believe you. They believe you now because of just we're experiencing now is just it's just unprecedented, and we see civilization just spiraling completely out of control.
Wow.
So I don't have any, personally, I don't have any, I can't think out 20 years, but, for my vocation, serving, at the helm of a large library system, I mean, I'm committed to being a good steward of taxpayer dollars and engaging our communities in a robust and prolific manner, and continuing to reimagine libraries so that we are meeting the needs of the community and that we can justify having, brick and mortar buildings in an era where, people are, attached to their devices and their screens, and to ensure that the work that we're doing, that we're strengthening, we're strengthening communities, and that we are indispensable entities in these respective communities. So that's what my plan is. That's what my plan is for today. But 20 years from now, I'll be with the Lord.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll be with the Lord 20 years from now. Yes. So I'm really excited about that, because I won't have allergy and sinus issues anymore. I won't have to pay any taxes. I won't have to go to work. I won't have to feel negative emotions. I won't have the propensity to fail. I mean, and I can meet the one who gave me everything. So I'm really looking forward to that.
So with that response, this is going to be a very anticlimactic question, but what do you want your enduring legacy to be?
I don't. I think your legacy, what your legacy is left, what that is, that's not for you to decide or for you to shape. It's for those who influenced you to divulge. And so I think that that's something that you're going to have to ask the people that I worked with, who are in my family, who are in my inner circle, what that is. I don't think I can do that.
Wow. What do you like most about this position right now?
I think what I like most about this position is just the capacity and the work to transform lives, to make people's lives better. The work that we're doing it's groundbreaking, it's cutting edge, it's transformative. We had a young lady in one of our innovation centers who couldn't afford a prom dress, so she went to our innovation center and she designed her prom dress, and it was such a hit that she started a small business designing prom dresses.
Wow.
And so the fact that the public library was able to meet a community need and to nurture a young entrepreneurial spirit is just invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I need to go to that innovation center.
Yes.
Well, it's been a plum-pleasing pleasure, man, just talking to you. I've learned an exponential amount of information that is going to serve me in a positive way.
Wow.
So
well, thank you for having me.
Well, of course. And you said that it's up to people to determine what your legacy is or your impact. I tell you what, you've made a massive impact on me, and I thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. And the feeling is mutual.
There was a lot of things that I learned from Jamar that really blew my mind. And quite frankly, I think we need more leaders that are going to be more transparent, just like Jamar. And being transparent is something that it kind of requires a certain amount of courage. I can understand that, because the world is built to where they don't want to hear things that's brutally honest. They want something that's a very sanitized version of the truth. But Jamar is someone that I can say he is in the right place, because he is a part of the solution. And if you're not a part of the solution, then you are part of the problem.